Piercing, gender, and sexuality. We're going to talk about whether or not these piercings give out secret signs to people that you're into something that you may not be into. Coming up next on Body Piercing Basics, episode number 135, so you might want to stick around. For those that are new here, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Hoping you're liking them, but you might not know who this feller is. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio, located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. What I'm going to talk about today is a common question I get asked. And it's usually somebody that's maybe from a small town or maybe new to piercing, and they're wondering, well, if I get this side done or that side done, or I get this piercing or I get that piercing, what are people going to think? Are they going to think that I'm this way or that way sexually? Are they going to think that I am a member of a cult? Are they going to think that I'm available? Are they going to think that I'm this gender or that gender or something in between? All of those questions. The reality is hey, unless you're really involved in whatever culture where that is significant, that piercing, or you come from a culture there that piercing is specific, chances are no one in that culture is going to make any assumptions about you. Now, are you going to get hit on by people that are creepy, so to speak? Well, if you hang out in creepy places, chances are that's going to happen. You know, creepy people tend to congregate together. The other thing is you're probably going to hit on more because piercings are beautiful. They make you more beautiful, thus more attractive. So that's a short question, but let's dig into the history of this and where this comes from. To do that, we have to go way back in the beginnings of piercing, back to the beginning of civilization. In essence, piercings have been a part of the civilized world since the beginning of the civilized world. It was originally used along with other body modifications such as tattooing, scarification, branding, and other modifications of the body, usually involving the genitalia, which I won't get into today because that's a heated subject, and I don't want to get into it, to be honest with you. I agree with some of it. I disagree with a lot of it. But I'm not from those cultures, so I have no right to judge. However, these piercings and other modifications were used during a period of time where a majority of the human population did not wear clothing, or at least not a lot of it. And it was a way of signifying, first off, your initiation into adulthood, or to mark that rite of passage, that you were part of the culture. It also would dictate what your rank was in the culture and your age and status or wealth in that culture. For example, if you have really large stretched ears and there's very expensive, very detailed jewelry in it, chances are, just like today, you're a wealthy individual. You can afford expensive jewelry. Now, if you think of this, it's kind of like a uniform, and it was also used to kind of tell friend from foe, or who you were dealing with. If you saw somebody with this particular body modification or this type of jewelry or this particular piercing. As clothes became a bigger part of human existence as we moved into much colder climates, that was replaced by clothing and fashion. Obviously, the more wealthy, the ruling class, etc., is going to have a very more, everything from brighter colors to more detailed clothing and multiple sets of clothing, and also maybe some attractive jewelry to wear around their neck or what have you. Piercing became less of a thing, along with tattooing, as culture in the West evolved. Usually, if you follow modern culture in the track of piercing, it became a more feminine thing, and usually only involved piercing maybe the earlobes, while most of these other piercings continue to be done and continue to be part of subcultures throughout the world outside of Europe. Now, if you like this, you find it helpful, you're enjoying it, what have you, you just like the sound of my soothing voice, please give me a like, let me know that you liked it. Also, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we post something. As always, I try to get to the comments and answer them when I can. So if you have a question and I have the free time, I'll be happy to answer it. Or, you just have something to add. Now let's move on to the modern piercing, or what I would consider pretty much everything in the 20th century or latter part of the 20th century. There were people getting pierced in Western culture, but they usually belong to kind of subcultures, often referred to in the mainstream as deviant or deviant behavior. I kind of said the same thing twice. Many of these activities, both sexual and otherwise, were considered antisocial, and they were also, in many cases, considered criminal. So, use of piercings, tattoos, and other body modification was kind of a way of marking that you were part of that subculture or that lifestyle. In the gay BDSM, especially leather scene and the old guard, it might even dictate what your role is in that community and what rank you are in that community. It varied from person to person and area to area because these are very isolated. Now, why would you do this if it was so weird to have this done? Because this is a period of time when a majority of people, when they saw piercings, were ear piercings on lobes of women. And I mean only women. We're talking the 1960s and even a majority of the 1970s. Unless you were kind of on the outside of the mainstream, you did not have ear piercings or earlobe piercings. Now, today, that's a common thing on men. You have to think about the fact that most of this activities that these people had the right to do and etc. were illegal. And they had to do a lot of it in secret, which means having a secret code that kind of tells other people that you're involved, that's visible, could, in fact, help you talk to other people and identify other people in the community, while everyone outside of the community has no clue what that thing means. They just think it's weird. I always kind of, and it's kind of like this. Punk rock is something that I grew up in, obviously, and there were body modifications involved with that, also fashion. There was a time in my life, if I saw somebody with a punk rock t-shirt and a funny haircut, maybe a couple ear piercings, I would generally stop and go talk to them because there were so few of us. And finding somebody that was a kindred spirit and into the same things that I was in the lovely city of Des Moines was a big deal. I made a lot of friends this way. However, as time progressed and as punk rock and alternative cultures began to move into the mainstream, seeing somebody with a punk rock t-shirt really didn't mean anything anymore. It could be they're a fan and they like the same bands I do, but it doesn't have that same meaning. They're not part of that subculture the way it used to be. They might be, but the reality is they may not be. They just like the band, which is fine. I love fans of music. A good example of this would be a meme I saw years ago. And it was a picture of the Ramones, and the caption underneath it read, "Wow, I didn't know there was a band named after my mom's favorite t-shirt." There was a point where the Ramones t-shirts, CBGB's t-shirts, New York Dolls t-shirts became very fashionable. I've noticed it starting to creep up. Joy Division seems to be a big one right now, where people see it in fashion. They see celebrities, fashion models, etc. wearing this. They go, well, that's a cool t-shirt. I should pick one of those up. And they have no clue who the band is, or maybe a limited knowledge of the band. Maybe they've heard a couple of their songs and like it. I'm not going to say that's terrible or anything, but it devalues the meaning of that symbol and that t-shirt to the people that belong to the subculture that was involved. And it becomes mainstream or normalized. With piercing, normalization first started with probably the navel piercing. When I started piercing in Des Moines, Iowa back in 1994, you might see occasionally a person in the underground scene that had their nose pierced, maybe multiple ear piercings. But for the most part, guys might have one ear pierced one time, and in females, maybe both ears, maybe multiple times. Otherwise, until kind of the navel came around, nobody was really piercing other parts of the body on a regular basis, especially those that are more in the mainstream, more conservative, and outside these subcultures. An example of this would be is on average, I would always do probably 15 times more navel piercings than I would do a nostril piercing. And the reality is a majority of the people getting navel piercings were people that were just kind of conservative. They were part of the mainstream. They just thought it looked cute and it was the new thing to do. Now, if I had somebody that came in for an eyebrow piercing or a lip piercing or a tongue piercing, generally they were people that belonged to alternative cultures. They were either into some type of musical movement or otherwise. You did not really see that crossover until you started seeing celebrities wearing facial piercings. Then things changed. There was a time, believe it or not, if you had a nostril piercing, it meant you were a rebel. You were out there to do something. Now, if you think about that in modern terms, almost 30 years later, it's a pretty normalized thing. It's normal to see people with nostril piercings. It's not uncommon. And it's broad through every race, gender, religion, creed, culture, etc. It is really common. It's normal, or it's been normalized. Another example of how fashion dictates how things move is the septum piercing. When I first started piercing, even in subcultures, a majority of the people that got septum piercings were big burly dudes that like to rock it out in the pit. I rarely did them on females. It was kind of a rarity, though I always thought it looked really good, depending on the shape of the face. It just kind of brings everything together. Skip ahead. There was a change in the type of jewelry that was available for the piercing. More dainty jewelry, more jewelry with gems, more designs, more fashion forward than the standard circular barbell, thick as you can do it, or catty bead, thick and big, so it hits your upper lip when you talk. Things changed. So thus, at this point in time, I do probably 20 times more just people who are living their lives, not really involved with anything, that are female or identify as female or more feminine, coming in and getting septum piercings. I would say it's a majority of them. Guys getting it done, less. Another example of this would be navel piercings. Navel piercings tend to be kind of considered a female or feminine piercing. Really, I believe the reason for this is not only does it seem to fit more into the human or the female anatomy, because you have that kind of the shape and where it sits, and what the Western version of beauty is, or cultural version or mainstream version, but it's the jewelry that most people stock for that particular piercing. All of it is large gem settings with things dangling off of it, very bright colors, very, very feminine. Now, you're not going to attract as many men getting it done because it doesn't look very masculine. I have struggled, in fact, with nostril piercings to find ends that are more masculine because not everybody wants a giant or small or dainty cubic zirconian or diamond or some other stone in their nostril. They want something that's just kind of basic. So it really makes me wonder how much fashion and the style of jewelry that's available for the particular piercing does this, well, that's this and that's that. And everything in between leaning one way or another, and we consider it that way. Of course, there are certain piercings that you can only do on people that have the physicality that would be considered technically male or female, regardless of what they consider themselves. Including, of course, genital piercings. You just can only do certain piercings with the anatomy that's available. However, a majority of it, I've never understood why people think this is a female one and this is a male. The other thing to consider is that there are stereotypes that have always been attached to certain piercings. The tongue piercing for a long time, if it was on a female, they must be a little sex crazy and sleep with anybody or sexually adventurous. No, that's not the truth. That's a fable made up by dirty-minded people. Most of the females I know that have tongue piercings, that's not why they got it done at all. The other thing being that if somebody had a septum piercing, they were a big burly badass. Or I've had viewers from the UK mention that eyebrow piercings, you must be a thug to have that. The hooligan, tough guy. And it's more about what people's perception is than the actuality of it. And it will fluctuate and change as the culture evolves and fashion evolves. Lastly, let's get into the whole thing with left and right, and the right side, the wrong side. The wrong side, oh no, I'm going to put out this. No. The reality is, if you are part of that culture or active in that subculture or whatever, and that piercing has meaning, and left or right has a meaning, then you should already know it. Otherwise, nobody's going to care. As I mentioned earlier, nostril piercings, for example, are very predominant. People that come from cultures where that's part of their culture and part of their rite of passage is getting that piercing are not going to look at you at the supermarket and go, oh, well, that means this about this person because the cultural reference that I have to it means this. Yes, if they're new to it, they might, but for the most part, just like me in the Ramones t-shirt, I'm not going to think that because you have a Ramones t-shirt on that automatically you're into all the same music that I am. It's kind of like that. So there is no wrong side. What it comes down to is what you think is beautiful and appealing to you. Piercings are largely about exploring and changing how you look and what you find fashionable or beautiful or appealing or marking a change in your life or what have you, a statement you want to make. It is a personal thing. Anything anybody else believes is pure nonsense for the most part. So do what you want to do is what I'm getting at. And that's all I have to say about this today. I hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, here's hoping you'll let your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see if your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and check out one of these other videos.